What's really hard about it is as dancers, we're constantly taking notes, and there are certain ways that are important for us to push or, be challenged and step through the challenge. And it's really hard to discern between the ones that are healthy and productive and the ones that are ultimately harmful.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Unchoreographed podcast. I am your host, Dr. Jenna Lower, and today we are diving into a topic and a conversation that I think is so important for every dancer to hear. And I know it's a topic that a lot of dancers out there wrestle with, and that is the idea that your dance career should follow a certain path or has a specific arbitrary expiration date on it. And we want to be able to challenge that thought for you and give you kind of a different take on what path your career can follow. So today I have a very special guest with me. I have Galit Friedlander. She is a professional teacher, dancer, choreographer, and personal trainer. She is also the creator and host of the DanceSpeak Podcast. And we know each other through our affiliation with Doctors for Dancers and doing some workshops together. So I'm super excited to have her here on my podcast, joining me today. And today we're going to be diving into basically challenging these myths that surround this idea that your dance career has to have this expiration date and encourage you to find your own path. So Galit, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to talk to you today.
I'm excited to hang. I'm so excited to talk to you. What a hearty, I know like that the blurb at the top is not easy with me. I already have so many syllables in my name.
It's great though. I love it.
Yeah, and as you were saying like what we're going to talk about, it had me think like who created that, the expiration date for the dancer? Who created it? Was it the ballet companies? Was it the audience? When was it? It just makes me think about like who perpetuates probably society, but like who Wow.
Yeah, that's a loaded question. I have no idea. Yeah. But you're right. Like it is just this like crazy idea that I think, and it's not even just dancers, right? It's anybody in this like performing arts world. We see it with like gymnasts and figure skaters and all of that too. So it is kind of a crazy idea.
It's multifaceted because I think on one end, there's like your actual physical capacity and shifts that happen over the years. But I'd say dance is not the same as full out sprinting where you're hitting like that mark of you have to get that mile in, 4 seconds. I don't know what it is anymore. It's different. It's also more qualitative. And then, there's like, sure, like the physical life, but it looks different because it's in its own, I think, nuanced category, as physically challenging as a sport, if not more, but also it's the arts. And then, that societal, like, at a certain age, you're over the hill, which is getting beautifully challenged now at last.
I know it is, and I think that that's a wonderful thing that it's finally like people are saying no, this is not the way it should be, and we don't want it to be this way.
Yeah.
So, well, I think, you've kind of embraced your own unique path in your dance career. And so could you just sort of share a little bit about your journey to get to where you are today, which I know is also probably a loaded question, but
I think I finally have the concise version. And I hope that if, listener, like if you listen to different, I feel like so weird saying this, but if you're interested and want to listen to more talks, you might hear my story again. So I'm going to try to keep it concise. I started really getting into dance around 12, 13. And like I woke up one morning, was wondering why I wasn't back in dance class. I had quit like taking a weekly class when I was 6 and wanted to go back and just fell in love with it. Fell in love with an hour away from the world. Fell in love with looking forward to it, fell in love with the process of getting better. And it was really motivating. I went to Performing Arts High School for theater. So I do theater for half the day, full academics for the second half. And if you're good with math, so that's 2 halves. And then another half after school, I would be dancing. And on the weekends, I'd be dancing. And I did a mixture of, I'd say, like overground and underground. So doing ballet and jazz and like at the studio. but then also going eventually to like the nightclubs where we had a lot of freestyle, the actual street scene. Oh, I was born and raised in New York City. Really fortunate with that piece. Just some of the best dancers. And then fast forward, I go to college, get a degree in communication so I can have that degree, decide yes after college. It's like all of this is long game. And when I was in school, I started a dance org. I was in a dance crew for a semester. Like, dance has been a through line for me. And then I decided to pursue it after college. There was a lot of waiting, and I remember seeing my friends in New York just go fully into dance and go fully into the industry. And I felt like I felt kind of left out, but I also knew like I enrolled in college. No one's leaving me out. Like I had left myself out. And then, so went to school in LA. That was a strategic move. Graduate and then get into the grind, taking dance classes, auditioning, doing dance jobs, gigs. I bring up this credit as a frame of reference, but I'm a believer that like as dancers, we're so much more than our credits. But I worked as assistant choreographer for Prince's Welcome to America tour for his 21 Night Stand in LA, 6 years as a lead choreographer for the WNBA, numerous dance jobs in between, whether it was stage performance, tour dates, projects, like all of it, lived that life. And then ultimately found my biggest purpose in teaching. And it was like right before it had become this super like hot thing. I just find that teaching ties in the love of creating with dance, connecting and sharing dance, and then you are dancing. It should not be for you that you're teaching. Like I feel like it should be for the contribution and what the art is of teaching. And like hopefully you find yourself moving within it if your body lets you. So I really love that. And then concurrently, I got into fitness because I wanted to get better at dance as fast as possible. I started seriously dancing around 12, 13, and everyone I was around started when they were 2. And I was like, my ballet friends, they're taking Pilates and yoga to get better. What do? I'm more into hip hop and house and whacking and voguing and popping and locking. How do you cross train for that? And I wasn't getting answers. So I'm noticing a theme here. So I started a long journey of training and learning like what to do and what not to do. I eventually got certified as a personal trainer. I do that as well. But I realized like I started the DanceSpeak podcast 9 years ago because I couldn't find a dance podcast. And I was listening to entrepreneurs. I'm not saying that a dance podcast did not exist. I'm saying I could not find one. And I was listening to a lot of like Tim Ferriss and Lewis Howes and these entrepreneur people. And I was like, this is exciting, but like, what are the stories in the dance world? Where is that? And it's just, I wasn't finding it in the podcast space. So I created it because I couldn't find it. So I guess that's a theme I just noticed.
I love it.
So that's how I got started and how we are today. How am I doing?
Amazing. I think that that's amazing. I didn't know your sort of story about like why you started DanceSpeak. So I think that that's really cool that you were just like, this doesn't exist and I'm going to do it. It's a true entrepreneur spirit right there. Thank
you. I feel like I'm like the clunkiest. I have friends that are right. So, okay, disclaimer, everyone, if you can't tell, I tend to not fully take acknowledgments well. I think a lot of us do this. So and it's like not fun to hear someone be like, oh no, it's like, no, own it. So, but yeah, it's also, I was in the dance world for long enough that there was more trust. So I remember like bumping into Antoine Troop when he was teaching at Millennium and being like, and by the way, everyone, I'm not saying necessarily do this or respectfully do this, but he and I were peer age. So, it's important when you're approaching someone, like take into account, are they of an older generation, your generation, lower, like, everyone is not necessarily you won't have the same tone with everyone. But I was like, Antoine, what a gross term, like pick your brain about teaching. I just really love to. And he was like, absolutely. And I remember sitting with him and he was sharing things about his teaching, like his style and what's worked for him. And I was like, well, this can't end with me. And then I remember being at a Lady Gaga audition and Richie Squirrel was leading it at the time. And he was like, all right, dancers, now that you're in the room, because he doesn't teach that I know of open classes. He's like, this is what I want all dancers to know. And I'm like, okay, I'm in the room. and I'm hearing this, it can't end with me. So I also was starting to have all these conversations that I was like, can't end with me. And I believe I can have more of these.
That's amazing. I love it.
Thank you.
You sound like you have so many good stories. We could talk about this all day. I have a feeling. I need to hear some more of these stories someday.
Would love to share part 2.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, so yeah, you have had a long experience in your dance career now with a lot of different twists and turns, it sounds like, a lot of different really cool experiences. When you look back, were there any moments that you sort of felt pressure that you needed to follow a certain path or trajectory in your career?
1,000%. And I'm going to do something, speaking of clunky, really clunky, which is those stories, my friends, if you're listening and you're also like, that piqued your interest, they're all in the DanceSpeak podcast. They're all in there, nestled in there. The good, the bad, the ugly, the tea. And then moving clunkily back or smoothly back into the question, I think first of all, when you decide that you want to be a professional dancer, and I can speak to the commercial world, there's this sense, or at least I had it at the time, that I had to be good at everything and be down for everything. So at the time, this is like early 2010s also, that means I have to be a sultry, sexy woman. I have to be able to kill it in heels. And this is before you have a bunch of heels classes and stuff. That's the standard because I'm a woman. I need to go to like be just wherever it's like that scene in a chorus line, like put a wig on me, da da da. And yes, it is important to be versatile. And I think it could be so wonderful. But when I look back, first of all, I cringe a bit because I was not comfortable in everything. And I'm not talking about comfortable, like expanding growth. I mean, I did not want to be booty shaking at 23. I personally did not want to be booty shaking on camera. So maybe, I think that now there's a lot more about niching down. This is like a bit of a hot take because, of course, you want to be, for your agent to be able to send you on as many things as possible. So yes, but also I really wish that I had known myself better and really leaned into that cross section of like, how do I read the best or come off the best? What am I most likely to book, and how do I love to express myself, and really like double, triple down on that. But at the same time, it takes us as long as it takes us. We're always constantly getting to know ourselves, and it takes us as long as it takes us to like really own ourselves. And I do think that some people have it from a really young age, but I think for more people, it just takes time. And that's one of the things that when we feel like we have to make our dance window is so small, we don't give that time to really grow into ourselves and then give it a go from there. So it was that feeling like I have to be as sexy as the video vixen and as cute as the Disney, and that can be fun and that can be important. And yes, you want to cast a broad net, but you don't necessarily have to. And I've seen people get really into what their niche is and succeed with that. I think, saying that you have to say yes to everything, I think that's kind of it, that you have to say yes to everything. And I feel also like I'm walking an eggshell saying that because there's a reason why that's advice. But I would also say everyone is different. So some people might be crazy versatile and love it. Other people, it might just like really be like, I interviewed on my podcast like Sheopatra, and Sheopatra tried all the things, and then she like really found what her style and niche is and quadrupled down on that and did well in that. So I think there's that. And then also I think that this has been broken, hopefully, but feeling like I had to fit a mold that's not my body type. So I'm naturally, I want to say if I'm physically active, I get muscular. And if I'm physically active and like eating normal balance, not being super stringent, I'm muscular, especially when I was dancing professionally more. I'm going to say it, I was a little bit thicker. I'm a little bit leaner. That's where my body was. But I didn't have an ample bosom. So it was like I was a little thick, but I didn't have the ample bosom. I was more muscular than a lot of the dancers to my left and to my right. And I remember someone sitting me down and being like, oh, this is so cringy. They had me go on the website of a major agency. And this was someone who doesn't even work in dance, who was in commercials and was like, I like to help people out. I'm going to help you out. And he sat me down in front of All of the women, I think that were like my height range or like relative, like we could go out for the same type. And he had more typecasting back then. And he was like, so what do you notice in common with them and what's different? And I was trying to pick out all these things. And what he got to was that I weighed more than them. And then I said to him, well, okay, I could get thinner, but like if I do, I'm going to have, I'm going to have nothing. I'm going to have no breasts. Like they're going to go away. And he was like, well, you could get work done. And that speaks to, right. It speaks to this idea of there's a mold that you have to fit. So I think that doesn't go beyond the dance world. Yes, there's more inclusivity now, but yeah. So I don't know if that goes in the direction, but those are the first couple things I think of. Yeah. And well, dancer,
I was going to say, I say it's insane, but we know that these conversations are really happening still. So we think it's crazy, but it's the reality what I think a lot of dancers are facing. I'm so glad that you're talking about this because it's so important, especially for our young dancers to hear.
I'm an open book. What's really hard about it is as dancers, we're constantly taking notes, and there are certain ways that are important for us to push or, be challenged and step through the challenge. And it's really hard to discern between the ones that are healthy and productive and the ones that are ultimately harmful.
Yeah.
So, by the way, like that person also ended up hitting on me and was also like romantically interested. It was so convoluted and weird. And coming to LA, especially when you're not like where you grew up, I think you're not around people who remind you of you. You're in a big city. You're there. You put so much into it. So it's like, well, what's this extra to push?
Mm-hmm. Well, it really stood out to me like immediately when you said, he said, and I was like, I mean, not that would be okay coming from anyone.
Yeah.
But that's
but
just.
Especially.
Yeah. And yeah. How terrible.
Yeah, it really was. It's confusing. And I even remembered recently there was a choreographer and we were like a bunch of us were hanging out, and then I think he was going to like drive me home, and it doesn't go in the direction you think. But I was wearing shorts and he looked at my legs, and I have like I do not have like I have like little veins all over my legs. I always have. I don't have like perfect even skin tone and or perfectly even skin tone. And he looked at me and he was like, oh, you might want to get that fixed, referring to all the veins on my legs. And it's also crazy to say to like, do you know these veins, they carry blood to these legs that carry me around the world. And I do the thing I love. Like, I love these veins. But I didn't say that. I didn't think that. He was like, oh, yeah, you probably want to get that taken care of. And I ended up going. And I went to get a bunch of laser sessions, and looking back on it first, there's no actual need as a dancer. Like, I understand there's really, like, the camera's never going to go that close if we want to get into that. And, yeah, like, why the bleepity bleep was he saying it to me? So you have those norms, and then you have the idea of, I'm going to dance professionally. So you have the normal path. You're going to dance. You're going to do different gigs. Maybe you go more to film and TV. Maybe you go more to tour. And then you retire one day. Maybe you go into choreography. Maybe you retire into teaching. And that's it. And you better do it before you're 30, especially if you're a woman.
Yeah. Oh, man. So many false beliefs out there that just, they're really infuriating, to even hear the experiences that dancers have to go through. I mean, I obviously was never a professional dancer. That was not my career path. But to hear that this is real and this is a problem, these are actual words that are being spoken to dancers, to anyone. And I think, again, like you said, a lot of, because you're doing this before you're 30, that means you're young, you're impressionable, you are maybe haven't developed a sturdy sense of yourself yet. Yeah. Very vulnerable. And that's a terrible thing to have to experience as a young person. And even if you're not young, it's a terrible thing to have to experience. But yeah, I think this is really important for dancers to hear.
And it's also discovering, be flexible with yourself. Like, as you discover, maybe you don't know exactly what your boundaries are. Maybe, what one person is okay with, another person isn't okay with. And that's okay. Some people feel really comfortable in their bodies and being sexy and all this stuff. And at this point, I'm like, yes, throw me in something slinky, like whatever, kids, cover your eyes, like, you know. But I think that it is understandable and important to really get, okay, well, where do these ideas come from? And part of it is like the history and background of ballet. Ballet has really specific demands on the body. And my understanding is, in the whole time I've been dancing, over 20 years, ballet technique has gotten better for longevity. And the standard has shifted. But if we're also talking outside of ballet, it's like, well, what are you dancing for? What's the trajectory? And yes, like, the dance world feels young. It really, and when I say young, it feels like I can say in LA, I can feel a weightedness, like a majority of dancers, it feels like they're in their 20s. And so you might change socially, or you might find that you want to have a kid, or you might not be making much money. And that's okay if you're running around at 23, but maybe at 28, you're craving to have more stability that comes from more income. And so there are reasons why that idea and concept is up there. I wouldn't say it's like, well, the most ridiculous thing. It's like, yeah, okay, there's a point there, but it's so not an absolute truth.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think just having that flexible mindset of even knowing, well, what are my personal goals, you know, of like, what do I want for my dance career? And if it's to settle down and stop dancing, great. And if it's not, that's also great. And being able to, you know, change and adapt.
The conversations behind the scenes that I've had that really, I think, can make a difference, that I don't know if they can happen outside, is I've known dancers before that retired out of dancing and then came back, and I think it was like they just needed a break. I know dancers who have come back. Well, not you see that publicly in a later season of life. Sometimes you're just tired of it. Sometimes you need to just get your ducks in a row. But and then also there are dancers that I've talked to that they're like, well, I do want to have a kid, and I want to really be able to focus on this kid. And you do have people like Brittany Perry Russell, who I interviewed. She was bringing her baby to her dance jobs, and you see her, she's super thrived. I do not know that I have that energy, but I'm saying it is happening. Also, Latrina Washington of Terrell and Trina Washington, they do a lot of teaching now, but they're a great choreography creative team, and they have done on their own, so like they have done so many industry jobs, tours, everything. Trina, I will get it wrong, but I think she was like 10 weeks after a C-section dancing for Rihanna. Now that is not the norm. That would not be me. But I'm saying also there's like, you wouldn't have known it watching her on the Rihanna. You never know what the journey is of these dancers. And I think sometimes going to well, why do I want to dance and what do I see for myself?
Yeah, I think I love the way that you put that you don't ever know the journey behind the dancer watching them. And you're right, there's so many different paths and avenues that people have taken to get there, and battles that they've fought. And what a cool thought to even just think about, you know, it's not something I think that I've thought about when watching a dancer dance. Like, what is their story? But what a great way to like really see a little bit more into the dancer.
Yeah, and I know, like, for me, I experienced something that a lot of people experience. It's not everyone, but I was getting on the dance jobs, and, like, I can now say I didn't love all of them. I mean, you don't have to love all of them, but I mean, like, some of them were, oh, this is what I've been working towards. And, like, people hardly talk about that because we're all we got to say booked and blessed, but the reality behind the jobs, a lot of people aren't aware of, like, that job that inspired you, the dancer might be like sleep deprived, exhausted, injured, not paid well, like not treated well. You don't know. What I've really enjoyed is I have zero regrets around pursuing dance professionally, and I love that I had the time that I was auditioning and like on that hustle, because it taught me so many things that I brought with me, and I don't have a what if around it. And then what I didn't expect was like this whole rich world around podcasting about it and teaching. And when I got to my whys, like the why I dance, for a long time I loved performing. I still enjoy it, but it's not a top need anymore. And I really love I love dancing. I just love the dance itself. And I know dancers that are more freestyle based. And so here's some things that maybe I didn't grow up with an idea of. First of all, that you can go in the industry, get the most out of it, feel enriched, and leave without it being a failure. You can fall in love with the freestyle scene and get into the battle scene, or just be like a lover of dance and go and learn and take and exchange. I love the freestyle scene so much. And I think that way too many dancers let themselves be intimidated. That's a push out of the comfort zone that I'd really invite people to enter. And you have dancers that just get so deep into it and pave their own path through it. So an example is Lockaroo, who is a whack dancer. And we started training years ago, and she never stopped training, and she found a passion in teaching. And what is Lockaroo doing today? Lockaroo has done some really cool gigs, but she's created her own group of dancers and training program, and they're performing in New York City at Lincoln Center and traveling, and she's been featured in the New York Times. That is not a pathway that you're taught about. That is that enterprise pathway. Then you have the council, and it's a group of women who are dope freestylers, and now they're at Nike campaign, and you can really that world isn't talked about enough. You could go and do cruises or dance at a theme park, be on a dance job and have it be steady. You're not going to have the same amount of hype as the Beyonce job, but it's also not one or the other, but that can also be really awesome. You can get into dance academia. You can stop dancing because you stopped dancing and go back at a later time in life and be like Miller Dowry, who's back to great, or I'm forgetting white hair, Kim Hale, who is 57 and dancing in New York. And it's there's so many different trajectories, and I think it's really important to listen to that inner voice. And we are in the time of creating your pathways. I still don't know. Maybe I'm going to be on stage with Madonna in three years. I don't know. I keep myself moving. There's just so much we can create with it. Yeah.
That's amazing. I think it can be so hard to sometimes, because you don't know. There's so many trajectories and pathways. And so you have to keep yourself open to the possibilities that are out there. And yet at the same time, we sort of talked about, well, what are my boundaries? And so that line is so hard sometimes to distinguish, how open do I want to stay, but how do I stay true to myself and what my boundaries are? Can you speak a little bit to that because I'm sure that took you some time to learn. How do I stay open but still within my own boundaries?
Yeah, it's still a process. I'm still discovering it in different ways, and this time it's now just I have a voice and I share things. How am I going to use that voice, and how am I going to be careful and mindful but also not inhibit my creativity that occurs through speech? So I still have a version of it, and also still constantly taking notes on things. I think one of the biggest things for me was probably trial and error. And I do see, here's the thing. I'm glad that I kept it broad, and I jumped in and tried to do the whole shebang. I think that when I finished a job or had an experience and I thought back to it and I was like, oh, that really didn't feel good. It's sticky. It's that really specific way when you feel like you have stepped out of line with your integrity. I think those were great lessons. I wish I didn't go through them, but they weren't the worst of the worst. And I think sometimes it can teach you, and the best thing to do is that's your new boundary. Maybe you revisit it, maybe it'll change, and maybe you don't. I think I actually think that's been the best for me. I want to give guidance that's safer, but
I think that's very real life guidance, though. I mean, I think that's a great way to put it, because we learn sometimes best from failing, and the best lessons come out of that. So I think, what really, the way that I always tend to look at things is well, what's the worst that's going to happen if I fail? It's probably not as bad as you think it is, right? You're going to learn a lesson no matter what.
Failure is our best teacher. I believe that. And I think also when you get really clear on your values, it can help. I say that, and I mean, I also was in LA in a time where you didn't have like a bunch of mentorship programs, but even with that, we're constantly taking in information, and I think it's important to like consider it, but also start getting clear with your values. And so for me, and a lot of performers were like, whatever you need me to be, I'll be it. But, you know, if you come from a background and you're like not going to dance to certain type of music or do certain movements, like there you go, that's a value. Or integrity, that's a value. So if integrity is a strong value for me, it's taken a long time to identify it. Doesn't mean I'm perfect about it. But what that might look like is if someone hires me and they're paying way late, then I can get clear, okay, this is like, I don't do that. Something that I started doing within my own business is I usually have people pay a deposit to lock in time for a service. I was able to, so like, I'm going to show up. I want to know that you're going to show up. I've created business where I'm not waiting around to be paid. But I think it's really that, actually. There's one another. Our bodies talk to us. Bodies talk to us. Our bodies, if we're not listening to our boundaries, our body, it can show up through an injury. It can show up through getting sick. So I know when I'm not honoring the boundary of what I need for rest and recharge, I tend to get sick. And I think that, I think listening to that, if you're injured, what was happening? Not like, oh, that was your fault, but what was happening? Were you not present? Were you stressed? Were you sleep deprived? Are you in a production where there's not enough recovery time? Is it that you need to see a physical therapist? Are you able to earn enough to go and see the physical therapist? Is that handled? I think also boundaries, our bodies will tell us really often what they are.
Oh, you are speaking my language. I love it. This is a conversation that I feel like I have over and over again in the clinic with my dancers when they're like, oh, I got, food poisoning, and oh, I had this, and oh, I had that. And I'm like, I want you to just like take a step back and think about everything you just told me. I don't think that's a coincidence that, all these things have happened. You're so right. Your body, it tells you, even if you don't want to listen, it's talking to you. So that's huge.
I took a self-development course, like a series years ago. Some people think it's a cult. I promise it's not. It's called Landmark, but I wasn't going to say the name because it could be a hot topic. But I was like, but no, I got a lot out of it, and like nothing. I didn't have a bad experience, so I got a lot out of it. So Landmark, and and they talked about this concept of integrity, and not as a moral judgment, but integrity being things in the way that they're intended to be. So the example that was used is a bike. When a bike is in integrity, it doesn't mean the bike is morally superior. It means just everything is in place. If you have like one of the spokes is off or the wheel is misaligned, it's out of integrity. It's not whole and complete in the way it's meant to be. Not a moral judgment, again. And when things are out of integrity, they tend to break down. And I have always found when things go awry, and the other thing was that humans were always going to be out of integrity and repairing. Like, that's just how it is. You're not going to live life and always be in integrity. But it really has me look, when something goes off, I can always find, it's not a blame game. I can just look, well, what happened there? And there was always something. My car doesn't turn on. That happened earlier, a few months ago. And it's like, well, my car was making a funny noise. And I wasn't in integrity with managing that, so eventually it didn't turn on. Yeah. So I'm with you.
Oh, that's a great analogy. I love that. I need every dancer to rewind that and listen to it again.
Listen, and I'm someone who it always feels weird sitting up here and being like, here's some answers, because I struggle with it myself. And I definitely have been when I used to be wound up way more. I get wound up like on a regular basis, but I was wound up way more. And I remember if someone said to me, hey, have you considered, I'd be like, you don't understand, because I have to do this and do that and go there and like all this stuff. And I couldn't hear it. I couldn't hear it until I could. So I know everyone also is in their own journey, but on the other side, that thing we're afraid to do that's like rest and recharge and all this stuff is actually the answer for all of our peak performance. And also clarity of decision.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. You're just a wealth of knowledge. I'm loving this conversation. I wish that we could continue talking about, I feel like we could talk about this all day long, but what I love is that not only were we able to kind of cover this sort of breaking through these myths and realities of the dance world, but I love that you were able to give like some really actionable things for our dancers to take away from this conversation. So I think, you know, like a big one that I'm hearing from you is like knowing your values and your boundaries, and I'm going to take that even into practice with my patients. And I would love, you know, I think that that's a great thing for me to even to suggest to somebody, like, well, do you know what your values are? And can you know, write them down, keep them somewhere. You know, I think about it for me a lot in the sense of business, but taking that into how I'm treating dancers too, I think that's such a great tip. So I love all of the insight that you were able to provide today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Can I leave with one thing?
Oh, please. Okay? Yes.
The dance exists before and beyond conventions, competitions, the studio, the industry, all of it. And I have appreciation for all of those sectors. I completely do. And I always like to remind my students, also, this is all made up. So the standards, like all of it, it's made up, but dance has existed before all of it, and it will exist after should things change, which they likely eventually will. And remember that dance is something that you have in cultures from way, 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 way before our time. And so that thing that calls to us, that brings us into it, that lights our fire, that's one of the most beautiful things to honor. And remember that we don't need to seek full validation from the invented stuff. And just remember to connect with that. That's it. And the second thing would be everything I'm saying, take it with a grain of salt, consider it. There's a reason why we have the expectations, but I would invite you, as you consider all of the things, is see, well, where is it coming from, and can I poke holes in this? So even now, I'm 37, I legit feel the best in my body. My body functions the best it has in its adult life, and I poked holes in that thing and found, oh, okay, well, can I train smarter? Okay, great. Well, what are the movements my body needs to do? And by addressing that and honoring that, I was like, oh, I think people also, there isn't enough of a culture around with self-care and longevity yet. So let me figure out those things, poke some holes in the limiting belief.
Oh, that's amazing. That is the perfect way to wrap this episode up. I love it. This wonderful tips for everybody. Galit, where can everybody find you? I want everybody to follow you. So where can they find you?
In the streets. No, just kidding. Instagram at GoGalit, GOGALIT. Feel free to send me a DM and maybe just comment on one of my posts so I can see it. Instagram, you can email me, GalitDanceLander@gmail.com, GALIT, dancelander@gmail.com. And then also hope to listen to the DanceSpeak podcast. It'll give us some stuff to talk about. So yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so glad you were here. And I'm going to link all of that in the show notes so everybody can find you really easily. But thank you so much. As always, I love our conversations. And
and you're such a best at what you do. Just like,
oh, thank you. You're so sweet.
Please listen or know, like I've gotten to host presentations that Jenna or Dr. Lower is giving, and you are a teacher's teacher, a teacher to the students. You are so excellent and passionate about what you do, and I see you.
Thank you. That means so much to me. I really appreciate that. Hopefully we'll have more workshops in the future together too.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining in today, listening in. As always, if you liked what you heard, please leave a review. Go ahead and send us messages. We'd love to connect with our listeners, and we will see you next time on the Unchoreographed podcast.